how to paint a landscape. This is an 11-inch by 14-inch canvas set in the vertical format. I'm going to start with a piece of painter's tape. I'm going to apply it at 4.5 inches, about a third up the canvas, and that will be my horizon line. I'm going to start with the colors Cerulean Blue and Titanium White with the brush 3/4 inch flat brush. So I'm going to wet my brush and pat it dry, and I'm going to load it with the white, the Titanium White, and a little bit of the Cerulean Blue, drag it out on my palette, and I'm going to make an X. So I am going to paint the sky, and I'm going to use these X style strokes to blend in the blue and the white. Cerulean Blue is always a good color that I like to choose for the sky because it blends nicely with the Titanium White to make it look like a sky blue. When we do skies and landscape paintings, the sky is typically dark at the top and it gradually gets lighter towards the bottom. So that means that I'm going to be using a little bit more of the Cerulean Blue at the top than I am the white. So I'm still loading it with the white and the Cerulean Blue, but just a little bit more Cerulean Blue to get it to be slightly darker at the top. As you continue down the canvas, start adding a little bit more white to the brush so that this blue gets lighter. Try to get your strokes to smooth out so they're not choppy and you can see the strokes. So you're doing the flip-flop sort of thing with the brush and you're blending it at the same time, and you're also smoothing out the strokes at the same time. You can also try to do the sky with just completely horizontal. So you can do like a gradient of the Cerulean Blue at the top and paint horizontally and then gradually add more white as you go down. I find that doing this technique helps later with the clouds because you already have some colors of white in there, and it just makes the clouds look more like they blend in with the sky better than if we just did a horizontal stroke like the gradient from blue to light blue to white. So that's up to you. I'd say give this technique a go. The colors blend very nicely when you do it this way. So my sky looks a little bit brighter towards the middle. So there's like a big, you can kind of see how there's more white towards the middle, and that is fine. I kind of didn't really intentionally do that, but I figured it looked okay. So if you get more white in certain areas, that's fine. I'm going to reload my palette with the Cerulean Blue and the Titanium White, and I'm going to continue on down the canvas. Again, my goal is to get gradually lighter as I get towards the horizon. I'm not going to go all the way down to that painter's tape because a lot of this area on the bottom right along the horizon is going to be mountain. So a lot of this white blue area will be covered, and instead of just filling it all in, I'm going to leave a blank spot. So sometimes I like to go in and add just a touch more of the blue in the upper right and upper left corner and right here at the top, just to emphasize the fact that the blue is darker at the top and of course blend it in. Okay, so part 2 is the mountains, and I'm going to use the 3 colors. I'm going to use Neutral Gray value 5, I'm going to use Mars Black, and Titanium White. I'm going to use a number 12 flat brush. It's approximately a 1/2 inch wide. You can use a bright, or you can even use a round brush. Actually, you can use any brush for this step I'm going to show you. So these mountains are high. I placed my whole hand at the top, so that point of this highest mountain pretty much is like 5 fingers from the top if you're using the same size canvas I am. About 2/3 up the canvas. That's how tall that mountain is. And I'm using the side of my flat brush and the titanium white, and I'm kind of just making my peaks here. So I'm just kind of sketching with my brush to make different varied heights of mountain peaks. So I have the very large one in the middle and the one on the left, and then there's two peaks on the right. Okay, and then I did not rinse my brush. I grabbed neutral gray value 5, and I'm going to fill in all my mountains with the gray. My blue underneath was not dry all the way. So that blue white in the sky that I'm painting over, and that is why my gray is starting to kind of blend in and look a little bluish in some areas. That is okay. This technique is going to work the same if yours dried and you're coming back to the mountains and doing it this way, versus if you didn't let it dry. So I'm doing wet on wet, and that's how I'm getting this. The point is that we want to fill in the mountain area with the gray, and I'm not worrying about overlapping at this point. There will be some overlapping in the mountains of some of the peaks being in front of the other ones, but right now I'm just kind of dragging this gray down, starting at the top and then dragging each stroke down. I'm using the full width of the brush. Okay, so this peak right here, I'm painting that in as well with the same gray and dragging each stroke down from the top to the bottom. And then, so you can go down all the way to that horizon line. I still left a little bit of a white gap down there because that's an area where we're going to cover up with some like bushes in the distance, trees in the distance. So really, if you feel more comfortable painting the gray all the way to the horizon, you can do that. I did not. So I'm just going to add just a layer in here to cover up just a little bit of that gray that blended too much into the blue there. For some reason, when I was painting this, my paint wasn't drying as fast as what I was used to, so it's a little bit more of a wet on wet. Okay, so this is a rinse your brush off and grab just the titanium white, and we're going to divide the mountains. Okay, so I'm using the tip of my brush, and I'm just going to do this. It's not really a zigzag line because it's not pointed, but it's kind of a curved sort of S line. And this is going to divide my mountains, because on one side of the mountains there's the lighter color, and on the other side there's going to be a darker color. Okay, so I did not rinse my brush. I grabbed the white. We're going to do white on the left side. So on the left side of all those squiggly lines, I'm going to drag in this white, and that gray underneath is not dry, and that's kind of working in our favor because it's letting that white blend. So I'm taking the white and I'm kind of dragging strokes at an angle and letting some of that gray still show through because it's not a solid color. It's kind of a mixed color that varies with the gray. If you look at a real mountain, you see different shadows in the highlight part of where if there was snow on the mountain, you'd still see some dark shadows in there. So on the left side, getting my left and right mixed up here. So still on the left side of this peak, I'm just painting the white in, letting it blend with the gray a little bit. And same with over here. And then you kind of need to decide at this point who's overlapping who. So I'm only letting this white go about this far here. And then this mountain is overlapping this one for now. And then this mountain is over here in the back. Okay, so that was easy. Then I'm going to rinse my brush off and I'm going to do the Mars Black. And then everything on the right side of the mountain is going to be the Mars Black. So I'm going to do kind of the same thing. Just be careful with this Mars Black because it is dark, it spreads fast. So I want to go in slowly, do the drag sort of strokes, let that drag stroke blend with the gray. And I'm going to kind of drag the black down. So I'm going to make it go down, then I'm going to make it drag to the left like this. So at the very bottom of the mountain, I'm just going to bring it over and overlap it a bit to the left. Okay, so see how much gray is still showing through. I'm not covering all the mountain. I'm leaving a lot of areas left with the gray. Okay, so it's not 100% solid black. My strokes are a little short, kind of jagged strokes. And then over here on this mountain, same thing. I'm going to drag the bottom part to the left so it overlaps a bit. Okay, little short jagged strokes. Let it blend with that gray a little bit. Let some gray still show through. Bring it down and sweep it down on the bottom. I'm going to overlap this part slightly over here. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this right side of the mountain. So let's say that you wanted to overlap the mountains differently. Let's say that this mountain on the far left is going to overlap the mountain in the front. So you would just take the darker color and you would drag it over the mountain that you want to overlap and just fill it in with the same technique. That's what I'm demonstrating right here. Okay, next I'm going to take this a step further and add some shadow areas where that light part is. So just the neutral gray, and without rinsing my brush, I'm just going to kind of do a few strokes here and there going in the same angle. So I don't want to change the angle, it's going diagonal. And I don't want to cover up all the white. I want to just do a few strokes here and there to make it look like there's just a little bit of shadowing on the white part. And then you would do the same thing but opposite. So add some titanium white to your brush and do a little bit of, there's some lighter areas in the darker areas without covering up all the dark. We don't want it to turn the same kind of lightness. We still want it to be dark on the right side. You don't want to overdo this because you don't want it all to blend together into the same gray mountain. So I'm going to stop and go on to part 3. We're going to do some shrubbery in the distance. And I did not wait for this to dry. I'm moving along here. This is a filbert brush and I'm going to use it for stippling. I normally use like a round brush for stippling, but this is a larger area that would be too tedious to do dots with a round brush. So this is a filbert brush and the color Hooker's Green. So where that gap is on the bottom and just above the tape line, I am filling in that entire area with the green. So I'm just stippling. That means I'm just using the brush like a daughter and I am making this bush area. It is not going too high. I didn't measure this area. I'd say maybe like 1 or maybe 2 fingers high. Again, it's right there above the horizon line. And then I'm going to add some color variation in there. So the yellow oxide, so just a little bit of yellow oxide in there so that it blends. And then I'm going to do a little bit of Mars Black in there too. Just a little bit of Mars Black. Don't do too much because then it'll turn all black. So the Mars Black, just a little bit, just a few dots here and there to make that shrubbery look like it's shadows. So this is to imply that there's just a forest way in the background, how the trees kind of grow up the mountains, but we don't really see it because it's so far away. It gives a nice buffer from, okay, so where the bottom of the mountains are and then the land starts. So it's kind of nice to fill this area in with this tree line. So you pull the tape off and whoa, it looks so cool after you pull it off. So you have a nice crisp horizon line and we're ready to work below the horizon line now. For the land area, I started with the creek and I'm using the color Cerulean Blue. And they number 12 brush. You can use any brush for this. It probably might be easier to use even a smaller one because what I'm doing, I started out large because it's in the distance, it goes away to that vanishing point and it kind of curves like an S and it gets smaller and smaller and it goes to a point. So I drew it out first with my brush, with that flash brush on its side, and then I'm using Cerulean Blue to just fill it in with left and right strokes. So I'm painting left to right, filling in the river or creek. And of course it gets smaller, so it might be more harder to fill that in. You can switch to the smaller brush, but I just turned my flat brush on its side so that I can get in there really close. And then it goes away to our little vanishing point way in the distance. So it's our typical 1-point perspective landscape painting. Okay, so before that blue dries, we want to add some white in there. So get that titanium white. And you don't even have to rinse it unless your brush is like way loaded with blue, then you can rinse it. So just grab the white and do some horizontal strokes in there. We're not going too detailed with this water. I'm just doing some left and right strokes. It's a little, since the strokes on the bottom are kind of thicker, and then of course as they go in the distance, they get smaller. And I'm going to go back here on the bottom and add just another few thicker strokes of that white using the full width of my brush. Rinse my brush off, and then we're going to go on to part 5, the ground. So the thing with landscape grounds is we have a little bit of atmospheric perspective. So that means that the color way in the back is going to be lighter and it's going to get gradually darker. So kind of how when we do the sky, but we start out dark and then get light, it's opposite. With the ground, we start out light and we get darker. Anyhow, I started with the yellow oxide and a little bit of titanium white. So I did that right below the horizon line, and my ground is green. So then I added light green permanent. So I have titanium white and yellow oxide blended together. And then I added light green permanent. It blended to that color. So we're doing a gradient sort of thing going on here. And I'm trying to get as close as the river as possible. In fact, I'm just going to leave a gap for now so I don't have to worry about the river too much. I want to concentrate on getting my colors to blend. And then as I move down to the bottom of the painting, so where the foreground is, I'm going to add the Hooker's green. That is my darkest green, and that's going to be the darkest green at the bottom. So you can see what's happening here. We have a light color way in the background. It turns to the light green permanent, and then it turns to the hooker green. So light to dark. And then it creates depth when you do this. Makes it look like there is land way in the distance. And then I'm just going to kind of go up and touch it up here and there. Get it. It doesn't have to be a perfect blend of the colors. This isn't geometry. It's nature. I don't know. That's not geometry. It's something else. Not a computer graphic. There we go. Not like a gradient on the computer that you make with the graphic. Anyhow, so it's okay if some of your yellow oxide goes in with the green on the bottom, and it's okay if you end up having a little bit of the darker green at the top. It's just kind of the gist of it is that it starts out light and it gets darker. And then I'm going to still leave a gap next to the water, and then when I'm done getting my colors set, I can go back in and I can start getting closer to the river and just getting that color to fill in where that white gap is. Go back in and drag it. There's a little bit of a kind of curve in my stroke closer to the river. But for the most part, so if you use the side of your brush, you can kind of get a thinner stroke in there. But for the most part, that green is just dragged to the river edge. But keep in mind that the river doesn't have to be exactly the straight line. Part of the riverbank kind of goes in, like some of the green can kind of overlap that blue a little bit, and then some of the blue can kind of seep out into the green. I am going to go in here and widen this part of the river just a bit. Of course, it doesn't work out in my favor that that green is not dry yet. So I got kind of a murky water in there. And then go back and add a little bit of white. Okay, I'm going to rinse my brush off, and I'm going to add just a few more of the yellow oxide titanium white in there, just a few marks here way in the different distance. All right, so we are going to move on to part 6, and you need to wait for this to dry completely. This is fast forward. Mine is dry, okay? I am using titanium white and a 3/4 inch flat, and I'm going to paint the birch tree. So over here on the bottom right, we have this very large birch tree in the painting. And I am going to start out large, and this tree, it takes over. It's goes all the way up the canvas. So the trunk is larger at the bottom. It's very much in the foreground. That's not even like the bottom of the trunk. The bottom of the trunk is like still, it's not even, you can't even see it in the painting. So that's how close this tree is. And then it gets smaller as it goes up. So I'm using the side of my brush. This is the 3/4 inch flat. Start out wide, so use the full width of the brush on the bottom, starting out wide, and then when you twist the brush, you turn it, and you can get the thinner stroke when you turn it right there. Do you see how I turned it? And then the tree is not like a perfectly rectangular tree. It's kind of lumpy and not perfectly straight. So this is the 12 flat, and I'm going to use the same white, and I'm going to do some branches. Okay, and I'm using the side of the brush, the tip of it, to get these thinner branches, and then I'm just kind of curving it and dragging the stroke, starting out kind of firm with how you're pressing the brush, and then when you get to the thinner part to get the tip, you kind of let go of it, hold the brush lighter to get a thinner stroke. So thick to thin with all these branches. Okay, so next we are using a 10-0 liner and Mars Black, and I'm going to do some of the typical little black marks that you see on all these lovely birch trees. Actually, no, I take that back. We are going to do that, but we're also going to do the little branches. So like little black branches that are poking out of this tree. So we have white branches and we have black branches, and some of these white branches are going to stem smaller to these little black branches. So that's what the liner is helpful for, to get these very thin sort of lines. So just very lightly hold that brush, make very wispy sort of branches, and then you can go in and do the little black marks. So that helps to do the branches first so that your white can dry a little bit, and then you can go in and do your black marks without it blending too much with the white. So we have a combination of this sort of cat eye shape going on with the little knots in the tree, and then we have the little tick marks that make it look like a typical birch tree. So I'm going to do that all along the tree from the top to the bottom to the top, adding the little marks. And of course, as you go up, it's smaller, it's further away because it's large, it's a tall tree. So the little marks are getting closer together and smaller. And then you may only need to do little dots with the brush as you get further up because you can't even see the lines. I'm going to make that one branch just a little bit thicker. Okay, so this is a fun part, and this is a number 4 bright. I like it because it's got the shorter bristles, so it's easy to do this stamping thing with the leaves. So this is bright, brilliant yellow green, and all I'm doing is stamping the tip of my brush to create these little leaves that are growing on this birch tree. I'm doing little stamps, kind of flip-flopping my brush as I make those little leaves. And then I want some different colors in these leaves because the sun could be hitting those leaves and we can see different shades in the leaves. So the white will blend in with the brilliant yellow green to make an even lighter green. And then the hooker's green will create another level of green. So I did not even rinse my brush, and I'm just going to add little dabs of the hooker's green. So already we see what happens. We got the nice color variation with the leaves. And then I could go further and add more leaves, but I did not. So next we're going to do the fan brush trees. I've been doing a lot of fan brush tree paintings lately. So, but this one's going to actually have some color in it. So, but it's the same technique. So you start with the little round brush, and then you do the middle line, and then you go to the fan brush, and instead of adding just the black, because this is not a silhouette tree, it's got some leaves on it, we can see the green, I'm going to add the hooker's green, but add a little bit of black in it. So this is a really dark green, and you can see what I'm doing here. So doing the same technique of stamping the fan brush tree. And look through the blog post. I will link to my fan brush tree tutorial so you can get a little bit more details about what I'm doing. But it's the same exact thing, only I'm adding color to it. So I went back over again with the hooker's green. Okay. I'm going to rinse my brush off all the way because I am going to add some lighter colors in this. So I'm going to grab my brilliant yellow green and maybe a little bit of white in there to make it lighter. And I'm going to stamp over it. So I did the darker part. Now I'm going to do the lighter part and see what happens when you stamp over that darker green. You get automatic highlights on that tree. And then I can go in and touch up the trunk of the tree with that 10-0 liner. So that middle line, but I'm going to add a little bit of a yellow oxide in there to make it lighter. So you see some of the trunk showing through some of the branches. Okay, then we have another tree, and this tree is smaller, so a smaller tree in the distance. And then I'm going to do the same thing. So repeat the same thing. Start out with the dark green and then go and add the highlight with the brilliant yellow, green, and white on the top. One tip with doing this is to slightly wet your brush before you load it. So sometimes I like to dip the fan brush in just a little bit of water and then load it with the paint so the paint is slightly wet, not dripping wet, just slightly wet. Okay, so the next part is the rocks. Rocks are super easy, might be a little intimidating, but they're really easy. So this is the number 4 bright brush with titanium white. I'm going to do the same thing kind of with the mountains, but kind of make it simpler. My shadow is opposite, but that's okay. So without rinsing the brush, I added the black and let the black blend with the white only on the left side. So we have the division of the right side of the rock is white, and then the left side is the black that blends in with the white. So I add just a little bit of black and just add it just on the left part of the rock. And same thing. So I recommend, I kind of did it backwards, doing the rocks starting in the back and then moving forward since they're overlapping, but that's okay. Kind of did it, started in the middle rock, and I did the rock in the back and then a rock in the front. And then I can go in and just kind of touch this up a little bit. This is not a super realistic part. It's just an accent to the painting. It's not something we're focusing on, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. Um, then I'm going to get my 10-0 liner and I could go in here and I could do some grass. So I'm loading my brush with the Hooker's Green, but also a little bit of titanium white to give it some color variation. And of course, this grass is all different kinds of heights just on the bottom. So we wouldn't see it way in the back, we would see it just on the bottom. So it's kind of sticking up next to the rocks. We can kind of see it on the bottom in the foreground, a little bit next to the river as well. Moving on to part 8, clouds. So I normally would not wait till the very end to do these clouds. I would have, could have, should have done them when I finished the sky. This was kind of a last minute decision of mine. So I'm using a filbert brush and I'm just going to use titanium white for these clouds. The clouds aren't going to be realistic. They're not the focus of this painting. They're just kind of clouds that blend in with the sky. So I'm just using titanium white for this. I like to use a filbert when I do clouds. And I like to start with the top and just kind of sketch out, outlining the top of it. And then I like to allow my brush to get dry as I work my way to the bottom. So I'm doing rounded strokes starting at the top, and then as I work my way towards the middle and bottom, my paint is getting drier, so you can actually just wipe off your paint, let it dry out, and just kind of blend it at the bottom. So just kind of blend that, and you can see how that sky technique where I did the X strokes with the white mixed with the blue kind of helps to get the clouds to blend in with the rest of the sky. Then I can kind of go back in and add lighter areas. So I'm going to do another puffy cloud over here. So these are just simple, very, very simple clouds. As the clouds that are closer to the bottom are smaller, so I might just have little dash lines for the clouds. And then we have some high altitude clouds in there. Then I could just grab a tiny bit of cerulean if I wanted to make that part on the bottom a little bit darker. And then the final last minute decision that I made for this landscape painting was to get this tree over here on the left to be taller above the mountain line, to get this, just to add a little bit more balance into the painting, because we have that very large birch tree on the right and we don't have anything else, any other trees sticking above the mountain. So it's up to you if you want to do that too, or it looks fine too with the 2 shorter trees. Totally optional. But this painting has come to its conclusion. Thank you for watching this landscape painting. I know this was a little bit of a challenge, but I wanted to throw this out there because landscape paintings have so many different techniques and elements and things to remember. So read through the blog post to learn a little bit more about what I do when I paint my landscape paintings, so you can learn a bit or two about how to paint your own landscape painting. Again, thank you for watching.